After several lively days of debate here in Omanis, the Biz News conference wrapped up yesterday, and judging by the conversations, there's plenty for South Africans to think about. Good morning. This is Biz News Daybreak. I'm Asimenyite, filling in for Ali Hogg. In a moment, we'll hear from economist Iraj Abedian on the three elephants in the room shaping global politics. Prince Mashele on the political reset South Africa may need, and John Endres on why the country still struggles to attract the kind of investment that produces real growth. But first, to the developments currently keeping oil traders and geopolitical analysts equally busy. The confrontation between the United States and Iran continues to escalate. Beyond the political brinkmanship between Washington and Tehran, the economic consequences are becoming clearer. A US refueling tank has crashed in Iraq, while energy markets remain nervous as tensions around the Strait of Hormuz threaten one of the most important oil routes on the planet. For traders, that narrow stretch of water has once again become the most closely watched shipping lane in global markets. Here's the latest update.
The Trump administration has launched a second 301 tariff investigation. This will focus on forced labor practices in 60 economies and include the European Union, China, and the UK. The probe will look to determine whether certain acts, policies, and practices are unreasonable or discriminatory and burden or restrict U.S. commerce. A U.S. Air Force refueling tanker, part of the American military campaign against Iran, crashed over western Iraq after an incident involving another aircraft. Reports of a potential incident surfaced earlier when the aircraft declared an in-flight emergency, according to flight tracking data. Now, U.S. Central Command gave no indication about the fate of the crew or the number of people on board that aircraft. The second aircraft did land safely. Any casualties would be the first from the U.S. Air Force during the war with Iran. The leaders of the U.S. and Iran both struck defiant tones on the 13th day of the war. President Trump said preventing Iran from having nuclear weapons and threatening the Middle East is of far greater interest and importance to him than the cost of oil. At the same time, Mojtaba Khamenei said the Islamic Republic would seek to ensure the Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed. Here is Bloomberg's Jennifer Welch.
A lot depends on what the U.S. and Israel would consider to be achieving their war aims and therefore giving them the opportunity to seek an exit ramp. I think President Trump has started to signal he is looking for it, but really the key question is what is he willing to offer Iran in terms of assurances that would lead them to be willing to accept it, and would Israel go along with it? And at this moment, it's very hard to say, even though we're 13 days into this conflict.
That is Bloomberg's Jennifer Welch. Oil prices bolted higher today with WTI gaining 9.7% to close New York trading at $95.73, and Brent crude settled above $100 for the first time since August 2022. The U.S. will temporarily allow some countries to purchase Russian oil already at sea. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said authorization permits will be issued as a narrowly tailored short-term measure. Now, this move is obviously intended to ease growing pressure on oil prices. Bessent said it will not provide significant financial benefit to the Russian government. The block of Hormuz is disrupting millions of barrels a day of supply, and it's also causing what the IEA described as the biggest hit to global production on record. Earlier today, Energy Secretary Chris Wright said it is quite likely the U.S. Navy will be able to begin escort operations by the end of the month. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent spoke about the plan with Sky News.
My belief that as soon as it is militarily possible, the U.S. Navy, perhaps with an international coalition, will be escorting vessels through.
That is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent speaking to Sky News. After the bell, Adobe said its CEO Shantanu Narayan will resign from his position. This company has been facing skepticism about its ability to thrive in the era of AI. At the same time, Adobe issued a sales forecast for the current quarter just above estimates. Here is Gil Luria, head of technology research at D.A. Davidson.
It's a tough job for the next CEO. So who that person is, whether they're credible in the AI realm, will be important important. In terms of the message, it just has to be a change of direction. Adobe has really said, look, we're fine on AI, we're agnostic, we're going to have responsible AI for responsible image and video generation. That message clearly has not resonated with investors, so that message has to be different.
That is Gil Luria from D.A. Davidson. Shares in Adobe were down 7% in late U.S. trading.
At the Business Conference, economist Iraj Abedian stepped back from the daily headlines and spoke about what he calls the three elephants in the room. One of them, he argued, is the way Donald Trump's approach to Iran marks a significant departure from the strategies used by previous US administrations. Whether that shift proves effective is still very much an open question, but it's certainly changing the conversation. Here's Abedian.
Let's begin with what I call them three elephants in the room. The first elephant in the room, President Trump. Unconventional, disruptive, fitting perfectly to the adage that someone's hero may be another's villain. The question of Iran's socio-political malaise is becoming intertwined with his personality. But that should not distract us from the humanitarian crisis facing 90+ million people, a crisis that coincided with Trump's second administration. It's a fact of history that all presidents before Trump, at least ever since George Bush, that is George Bush's son, 95 to 2000, had full knowledge of the nature of the Iranian regime, and in some cases collaborated with it during their Iraqi-Syrian interventions. President Bush coined the term axis of evil, placing the Iranian regime at the focal point of this axis. Whilst both Republican and Democrat presidents expressed many concerns about the nature of the Iranian regime, yet none showed no determination or any determination to deal with the inherent and inevitable risks involved. More specifically, they failed to stand by the people of Iran. Despite the atrocities that they knew were being carried out, tortures and imprisonments that the Iranian nation was subjected to. Ironically, the EU governments were even worse, notwithstanding their so-called commitments to human rights and social liberties. President Obama opted to appease the regime by providing it with a plane load of cash, literally US dollars, delivered in Cyprus, and relaxing international sanctions against it. All the cash and proceeds of sanction relaxations were used to finance the regional proxies, fast-track the missile development technologies and production. To his credit, President Obama finally, in 2022, admitted that he made a mistake not supporting the Iranian nation during their Green Movement uprising. Whatever I make reference or whatever statistics I provide, I've got reference here for those who want to have a copy of it. President Biden maintained sanctions imposed by Trump's first presidency, but turned a blind eye to the rest of the regime's activities. In short, all the US presidents ever since President Carter, they stood by the regime against the people of Iran. They did so knowingly. President Trump has turned out to be different, aligning himself with the people against the tyranny of a fully armed and murderous state. I'm also under no illusion that in aligning himself with the people of Iran, he may well have his own self-interest at heart. That's his duty to take care of his nation's interest. The second elephant in the room, Prime Minister Netanyahu. His 30-year mission, personal mission, is to confront Islamic Republic, which he sees as the head of a hostile and determined octopus with tentacles in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, and Yemen, and elsewhere. Israel's actions under his leadership are problematic for many, even for Israelis, or some Israelis, understandably. It may be helpful to remember that Israel provided military assistance to Iran during the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s. When the war ended, the Iranian regime resumed its open and systematic hostility against the State of Israel. I therefore submit that the Israel's existential confrontation with the Islamic Republic should not distract from the Iranian population's quest for freedom and social liberties. Confusing the two, I argue, is an intellectual failure leading to misguided discourses and wrong conclusions. The third elephant in the room is the legacy of contemporary American attempts at regime change, namely Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan. None turned out to be as planned. This evidence, or such evidence, is raised whenever the Iran conundrum is discussed quite justifiably. It is tragic how often and how many analysts intermingle the two and conclude quickly that the best is to side with the regime, and in effect stand against the peoples and their wishes, no matter how destructive and despite the terrorist activities of the regime.
Back to South Africa now. Political analyst Prince Mashele delivered one of the more provocative sessions at the conference, laying out what he described as a 10-point roadmap for political renewal. His argument is that South Africa's future may depend on building genuine cooperation across political and racial lines. Something that sounds simple enough in theory, though in practice, the country has been trying to figure it out for the better part of 3 decades. Here's Mashele.
A joint politics of blacks and whites in South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, we have never done that politics since the beginning of time in South Africa. We may fool ourselves. We have never experimented with that kind of politics. It's a difficult politics. We have not seen it, and we don't trust each other. After the Anglo-Boer War, the Afrikaners and the English, and you know that history very well, they had butchered each other, and they came to the conclusion that this is self-destruction, it's not sustainable. Let's go to a town called Vereeniging and strike a deal that we shall do joint politics as former enemies. And they did from 1910. And the English understood in that deal that the Afrikaners are the majority. The leader of the state will always be an Afrikaner. Just look carefully from 1910. Even though, in inverted commas, the English were still in charge, but the leader is Afrikaner. So what I'm talking about, this historic deal, has actually been done in South Africa, but only by whites. Since 1994, the blacks were so arrogant, giving the middle finger to the whites, thinking that they can do it alone. Now, the component that is arrogant among blacks now, it's only political criminals. The majority of blacks have now shifted. They want blacks and whites to do politics together. The only problem is that those who must lead the politics on the part of blacks and whites don't trust each other, and they are resisting to do it. What does this politics look like? And I have distilled this thing very carefully down to detail. I'm now going to present to you, call it the mad Prince Mashele 10-point plan. How to fix South Africa. Point number 1, assemble an inclusive, ethical, competent, and a highly educated team of blacks and whites. That's the first thing you do. We have them in our society. I've actually prepared a list. We have them in our society. They are not in government. Government is a theater of scoundrels. So we must get those people to go into the political theater. And it's going to be a fight. And elbow out the scoundrels. Let the proper human beings of our country take over. Point number 2, jail political criminals and restore law and order, and you must be merciless about it. Beginning with the guy you used to love, who has disappointed you very badly, Cyril Ramaphosa, must be arrested for pala pala. If any one of you was found with dollars in your sofa, the ones he has not denied, you would be in prison. Why is he not in prison?
Good news from Southern Africa. BizNews partner DCC Hotel Group showcases world-class hospitality across the region. We spotlight more than 100 carefully selected lodges supporting tourism, local communities, and conservation. Here in Hermanus, whale watching and coastal charm await. Your home for the BizNews Conference 2026.
And finally, while there are a few reasons for cautious optimism in the local economy, from improved business sentiment to a somewhat steadier fiscal outlook, John Endres from the Institute of Race Relations offered a dose of realism. South Africa, he says, may be limping less badly, which, while technically an improvement, isn't quite the same as running. When it comes to fixed investment, the country is still a long way from the levels needed to unlock meaningful economic growth. Take a listen.
At the superficial level, the case for optimism is easy to make. Our bond yields have come down from around 11% at the time of the 2024 election to around 8.5% now, and they even dipped below 8% in February before the hostilities kicked off in the Middle East. Business confidence has improved from 109 points when the Government of National Unity was formed in June 2024 to 131 points in January, and that is the latest number available. That's the Saki Business Confidence Index. We've just received the latest GDP growth figures, 1.1% for 2025, and that means a doubling of the 0.5% that we recorded in 2024. National Treasury now expects the economy to grow at 1.6% next year and with a 1.8% average over the next 3 years. And that sounds like growth is accelerating. The inflation target has been lowered to 3% with a ±1 percentage point tolerance band. Load shedding dropped sharply from March 2024 and was suspended in May 2025. The GNU has proved more durable than many expected. Now, many people were expecting it to collapse every few months, but it's still around, it's still there. And there is at least some continued movement, however halting, towards greater private participation in electricity, ports, and rail. So if you wanted to make the bullish cocktail party case, you could do it in one breath. The fiscus is stabilizing, reform is inching forward, inflation is lower, business confidence is up, and South Africa is finally behaving like a normal emerging market again. But that is precisely where the caution must begin, because none of that on its own means South Africa has turned the corner in the sense that really matters. An economy growing at 1.1% is not turning the corner. It is limping less badly. An economy growing at 2% is not turning the corner either. Frankly, even 3% would not be enough to repair the social and economic damage South Africa has accumulated over many years. The deeper problem here is that our fixed investment rate remains far too low. The IRR's latest growth strategy paper makes the point bluntly. South Africa has been stuck in a low-growth rut for over a decade. In inflation-adjusted terms, so in real terms, fixed investment fell from 775 billion rand in 2008 to 660 billion rand in 2024. And as share of GDP, it fell from 21.6% to 14.5% over the same period. And just to remind ourselves what fixed investment is. So fixed investment is all the money that gets invested in things like roads, rail, dams, factories, shopping malls, buildings, so all the stuff that you make out of concrete and bricks and steel that you can't move easily. That's why it's fixed. It's fixed in one place. South Africa's rate, 14.5%. The global average is 26%. And emerging markets are often over 30%. So we are like miles away from where we need to be as a country in terms of our fixed investment. We are not building roads, we're not building rail, we're not building ports, we're not building dams, we're not building factories, we're not building buildings enough. We have to do far more of that.
And that's Business Daybreak for this Friday morning. If you missed any of the discussions from BNC 8, including conversations on geopolitics, economic reform, and South Africa's investment outlook, you'll find the full sessions on biznews.com. I'm Mashele. Thanks for listening and have a good day.